Now we are here with Jeremy Whittington. Jeremy, please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about who you are and your work.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jeremy Whittington. I'm the artistic director here at Stage Left Theater in Spokane, Washington. I am an illustrator, scenic designer, writer, and now a theater manager.
Sounds like you wear a lot of hats.
I do. I've always considered myself one of those jack of all trades kind of people. I'm not exceptional at any one thing, especially not acting and singing. But I do enjoy all of the aspects of the arts.
So tell us a bit about your relationship to the arts. How did it start? Where's your relationship to it now?
Well, I guess I'd have to say it started as far back as I can remember. My earliest recollections of any kind of art connection for me was in first grade. We had to do drawn book reports, and I chose Green Eggs and Ham, and I drew the characters and rewrote the story basically as first graders do. And my teacher at the time sent it back to my parents saying that we were told we weren't allowed to copy or trace anything out of books. And I remember my mom was furious because she watched me draw these things looking from the book and not tracing them. And so that's the first debacle I had with the arts, was actually in first grade. I remember drawing on the back of all my tests growing up. When I was in third and fourth grade in New Orleans, I attended the New Orleans Academy of Art, Design, and Music. So that kind of spurred a realization that art was so much bigger than Green Eggs and Ham for me. I got to, learn sculpture and painting and things like that. My passion was always comic books growing up. So a lot of my, even now, a lot of my work kind of harkens back to that illustrative technique that I practiced in my early youth and adulthood. I attended Ohio University in Athens, Ohio, for theater production, and I fell in love with the theater. I got to act in a few shows and design a few playbills and production posters, and I learned the technique of building and painting sets, which was really interesting and intriguing for me at the time. In my junior year at Ohio University, I fell into a trap that many college students do, and I started partying too much and actually delve off the deep end and became an alcoholic and an addict for a while. I lost my full-ride scholarship to Ohio University and spent the next 15 years basically waiting tables and bartending, and living a life that was rough. And yeah, it was a hard life. In 2009, I had moved out here to Washington State many years prior. In 96, I moved out to Washington State. But in 2009, I got clean and sober. And soon after that, I went back to college and got 2 degrees in graphic design. While I was attending college, I stumbled back into the theater for the first time in 20 years. I saw a production of Sweeney Todd the musical at Lake City Playhouse in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And it just re-sparked all of this passion that I had for theater that I had forgotten about. I'd gotten back into the academic world and kind of covered up those regrets of the past, if you will. And so 2014 was my big splash back into the theater world. I started acting again on stage. The artistic director out there at the time had heard that I had drawn comic books in the past and asked me if I would paint a set for him. I remember saying, "Oh, I've never painted before. I've never painted before. I think you're asking the wrong person." And he said, "Well, I've seen some of your work, so I'll give you $600 if you'll paint this set over in Spokane, Washington for me." And I said, "Absolutely." So that was my first gig, was painting a set for a show called Boeing. And I remember when the news article review came out about the show and seeing my name in there and them talking about the set and how beautifully painted it was, and just I'm getting teary-eyed right now. I just remember that feeling of, this full circledness, I guess, that life brings you sometimes, where everything from my youth kind of culminated and was re-gifted to me in a new and unique package then. So that started my journey of scenic design. I did that for multiple theaters here in the Pacific Northwest for a few years. And then I moved to Texas, to San Antonio, where I was the resident designer at the Public Theater of San Antonio in 2017 through 2019. Such a great experience. It was the oldest municipally built theater in the country, which was kind of cool. A very old building, a large stage, 350 seating capacity, and a cellar theater that housed, I think 120 was the seating capacity down there. So I was just go, go, go. I was designing, Disney's Newsies and Mamma Mia and giant shows, Matilda on the top stage, and real quiet, intimate shows, An Infinite Ache and Assassins and Real Women Have Curves in the basement. So I got this sudden 3-year burst of explosion in terms of what I learned and what I got to create before moving back up here to Spokane in fall of 2019, where I took over Stage Left and I now reside.
That sounds like quite an incredible journey, and that the arts were running throughout the whole thing.
Right. Yeah. Sorry to make such a short story long.
We welcome that. We absolutely welcome that. I'm curious, do you feel like the arts played any role in your recovery?
Oh, absolutely. I remember thinking when I first got sober back in March of 2009, I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be funny again. I'm never going to be able to create art again. Like all those misconceptions that people have about drugs and alcohol. That crutch that I had for, almost 2 decades was not going to be there anymore. And I have to say, it was a little bit of a struggle when I first got sober, the first couple months of trying to, even draw Wonder Woman or design a logo for the website I was creating for my new graphic design pursuits. Like all of those things were kind of difficult at first, but I think the sheer act of creation really lent itself to helping me, blossom, for a lack of a better term, into the artist that I am today.
That's incredible. So let's turn and look forward for a minute. How do you see your work evolving in the future?
Well, one of the things that I am really passionate about is exploring the intersection of different artistic movements and practices into theater. Theaters to me is the kind of art that is a culmination, a big stew pot of all the arts. I mean, you have music, you have visual arts, you have performance arts, and all of those break into other categories. You have wood and fabric and metal and paint and costumes and songs. And theater for me just is this big summer stew of beauty, for lack of a better term. It's something that brings so many different diverse people together and so many different diverse art forms together that I think my exploration in the future is how to incorporate even more aspects of the art into theater. How do I create a show that is totally based on sculpture? I got to design Fun Home, the musical down in San Antonio, and I really wanted to hearken to the source material of Alison Bechdel's graphic novel Fun Home. So I drew comic book panels with our cast in it and had word balloons from the graphic novel to imply what was happening, and I pasted them all around the theater in the round that we had in the basement there. And so I like that idea of exploring what can be done unexpectedly and differently while creating some new art style or art form.
I hope you share it with us when you start making some of these big ideas that you've got here.
Oh, absolutely. Happy to. Art
Great.
is nothing if it's not shared, you know?
Agreed. So let's go back in time a bit now and rewind the clock a couple years and lead us to this moment as to why we're having this conversation. So the Luminary Awards, for which you were recognized, they recognize artists and cultural organizations who stood as shining lights for their communities during the darkness of the pandemic. So if you can, take us back there and tell us a bit about what you did during that time.
Sure, sure. You know, when COVID hit, I think everyone kind of thought it was going to be a 2 week shutdown, and then it was maybe a 30-day shutdown. And I think once we realized that it was going to last longer than 2 months, we started talking about how that pivot might look for us as a theater. Some of my closest friends, Robert Tomberry, Paul Watts, Elizabeth Kittig, Michael Schmidt, the five of us kind of got together and started brainstorming about what we could do during a pandemic. The first result was a series called Masterpiece Monologues that was actors given new works scripts in an email, and they would film themselves doing these monologues however they chose. It could be a standard stand there and speak the monologue, or some of them turned them into mini film noirs. I mean, there was such a variety of what we received back. But the biggest, I think, blessing that came of that is the artists involved were all just so excited to be making something, you know, to be creating something. I think that that theater specifically, and any performing arts really, took the biggest brunt of the pandemic, because the people that are involved in these businesses, because they are businesses, felt like they were stifled, that there was no creative process. And then you see all of these wonderful poems and online concerts come out of the pandemic that really were so special and might not have been possible or even fathomed had this pandemic not happened. So we started small with this monologue series, and then we wrote a grant in hopes that we could produce some one-person plays. And we received that Spokane Arts grant, and it allowed us to produce 4 one-person shows. What we did is we had each actor come in with their director and stage manager. So there's only 4 people in the theater at a time. And they would rehearse for their 3 or 4 weeks. And then we would film these one-person shows from multiple camera angles and basically edit them into a feature-length film. Those got so many great reviews. People were so excited. At first, there was the skepticism of, this is not live theater. That was what we heard a lot in the beginning when we first started the very first one. And of course it's not live theater. We knew that. We weren't able to make live theater though. So we as artists needed to still find that outlet that allowed us to be creative. So each of those shows, we streamed for 2 weeks each, and that kept us profitable and viable as a theater. And it also kept us in the public eye. That was really important for us, is to maintain a connection with our public. When the pandemic shut us down, we only got to see each other in tiny little boxes in Zoom meetings, and that was difficult for a lot of us. And so I think that doing those small festivals that we did, and then the 4 one-person shows during the pandemic, really helped keep connection. And gosh, I mean, if humans need anything, they need connection.
So how did you feel when you found out you were an honoree?
Oh my goodness. I was beside myself. I mean, first of all, look, there's no one person that can do this at all. My right-hand man, Joy Wood, my right-hand person rather, Joy Wood, is instrumental in everything that we do. And when she told me, you got to check your email, and I read that I was an honoree, I'm going back to that moment, and I was literally beside myself. I just couldn't believe what turns life had taken to put me in a position to be recognized in a way that I never expected, and honestly, sometimes don't even feel I deserve.
Well, I have to say that the state of Washington thought otherwise. So tell us, as someone who is an honoree and has been doing this work, what advice do you have for people, for organizations who want to use the arts to help their communities or connect to their communities?
Gosh, try everything. I can't stress that enough. We had some failures, some things that worked better than other things, but we would have never known what worked and what didn't if we didn't try. I think that we have now more season partners and producers than we ever had, and most of them stemmed from the work that we did during the pandemic and them seeing what we were trying to do. I think it's just so important that life always finds a way. We know that, but I think art does too. Art has been around since we were painting handprints on the walls in caves, and it's never going to go away. But how do we keep it not only viable in any scenario, but thriving? And I think that's a question that not just arts organizations, but all businesses and companies and corporations and governments need to start exploring.
That's a big bird's eye view there. Let's zoom it back into you for a second. What's next for you?
Well, we reopened live shows back in January, and we are now in the middle of our 2022, our 9th season as a theater. We're a young little theater, and by little I mean little. We're a 60-seat black box theater, so we're excited with the shows that we have coming up. We're right now in rehearsals for Passover as of this podcast recording by Antoinette Nwandu and directed by Malcolm Pelez. So we're very excited to be bringing the first show that reopened Broadway to our little theater stage. That's pretty exciting for us. The rest of our season includes Admissions by Josh Harmon and the Rocky Horror Show will round out this year. We have a couple of festivals in between, and then we start our 2023 season in January, and that'll be our 10th season. So we're going pretty big with that. On a personal level, I just want to keep creating art. We've diversified our board and the people that we work with. I think that's been an important aspect of our journey, is to recognize the contributions of the members of the world majority and to bring their stories to our stage and into leadership. So we're just going to continue, trudging that path. It's hard work, but it's definitely worth it.
I want to ask you briefly about, before I let you go here, about your own inspiration and where you get inspiration from. I saw on your website, jeremycrates.com, that you draw inspiration from everything, including science fiction to the textures that you see out in the living world. Can you talk a bit about your inspiration and tell us all about what you love about science fiction, please?
Absolutely. I'm a self-proclaimed and proud nerd. I grew up on comic books. My dad was a Southern Baptist minister, and his work took him to opening mission churches in the South when I was growing up. And we were often very removed geographically from other people. So comic books were my outlet. And I just lived vicariously through these heroes and through the stories that they taught me how to do good for other people and how to stand up for the right, and kind of keep the darkness at bay. So comic books and early sci-fi movies, Star Trek and Star Wars, and all of the variations of those sorts of things really played into, I think, my being very wide open creatively about what's possible. My illustration, I think, plays a role in my graphic design, which plays a role in my scenic design. We talk about textures, and one of the cool things I love about designing sets for theaters is coming up with both realistic and fantastical kind of textures that you either see or don't see or wish you could see in the real world. Um, cloud watching is awesome. I encourage everyone to just lay back in the grass on a warm day and look at the clouds and see the shapes and the pulsing and the movement and all of those things that come with the sky. But you'll see that, in a along the curbside, the way the dirt is sprayed up on the curb creates such an interesting texture that might look like, a pterodactyl wing, or I don't know, like I can totally go off on talking about seeing shapes in various textures, and I think there's some sort of psychosis that's related to that. I think I've heard where you see faces in patterns, but I see faces, I see abstract shapes that coalesce into something more real for me, and I think that not only lends itself to how I present art, but I think it also lends itself to how I think about processes and possibilities. While we're creating art, we're still running a nonprofit business that has to survive. And I think seeing patterns in a different way helps me manage a business in ways that might seem unique, and to take risks. Like I said before, just try. I think that when we step back and just calm our minds for a minute and look at the world around us, we can see so much interest and so much diversity, and it's just really cool to experience, with clean and open eyes, the world around us, and try to see how we can interpret that, not just as an art form, but as a way of life.
Parents, if you're listening, let your kids read the comic books. Look at the kind of mind it creates. That is just such a fantastic synthesis, Jeremy. Thank you for sharing it. So, last of all, I just want to ask you, about our state. Like, what in your mind makes Washington special, makes its art and culture special and unique?
Such an interesting question. I've lived all over the United States, and I've created art in many of the regions of the United States. And I think that for me, the Pacific Northwest has felt the most supportive for me in the arts, not just on a personal level, but on a state level. Washington State talks about the arts, not just openly, but aggressively. We promote art in a way that I think other states can learn from. The indigenous cultures that we have here, coupled with the vast variety of racial and cultural diversity that exists specifically in the Pacific Northwest, really lends itself to multiple perspectives coalescing into a piece of art or production, or a statewide art program. I think that we here are fortunate to lean to the arts in a way that recognizes their importance, not just as a viable business option, but as a spiritual option, as an option that lifts the soul and expands the mind.
We couldn't agree more. Now, if people want to learn more about you and your work, where should we send them?
Oh, good question. Head over to stagelefttheater with an ER, theater with an ER.org, stagelefttheater.org. You can keep up with all the events and productions that we're throwing your way, both live and streamed. We pride ourselves on being a new works theater, so much of what you see come out of our little theater are brand new world premieres. And we also pride ourselves on being a multimedia theater, so you can see both live and streamed versions of most of our productions. If it's able to be streamed, we stream it. So check us out and see what's next.
Jeremy, I want to thank you so much for coming on Creative State today, and I want to congratulate you again on being a Governor's Arts and Heritage Awards Luminary Award honoree.
Thank you so much. It was great talking with you.